This is SSN
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Have you ever wondered why you and most of the women you know seem tired so much of the time? Well, this is the podcast where we explore why. I'm here to help you better understand how your body works, whether we're talking about heavy, painful periods, why you have to pee all the time, or what the heck is happening to your body through perimenopause. And I'm not afraid to shed light on conversations that I feel we need to be having out in the open. Like, why are so many women struggling with irritability and anger, drinking more alcohol, and injecting our faces with Botox and fillers in an attempt to stay young? I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Vadeboncoeur. I'm a naturopathic doctor, mom, fatigue fixer, and loud and outspoken woman who's fascinated by the state of modern women's health and well-being. I know that you, yes, you, are incredible, and I want you to have the energy you need to share your unique gifts with the world because we are in desperate need of more female leadership. So join me for conversations that will help you feel less alone, more informed about all the things that might be draining your energy, and inspired to fix your fatigue and wake up every morning feeling rested and excited for the day ahead. I can't wait to share today's episode with you, so let's get into it. In January 2020, a few weeks before the world shut down because of COVID, I did something that would change the course of my life. I stood in front of a packed room of women, shared a deeply personal story, and then invited them to join me in something brand new, a women's circle called the Wild Collective. The next 10 months opened my mind and heart to a few important lessons. 1, no matter how different we appear on the outside, most of us have the same dreams, desires, and fears. 2, when you put women together in a circle where storytelling feels safe, there is a profound level of connection and healing that takes place. And 3, when you share your own stories, like I did, first speaking out about my abortion to a group of women in the Wild Collective, those stories become lighter to carry. Today, I'm joined by the woman who brought the Wild Collective into the world and into my world. She is my soul sister, a close confidant, and one of the people in my life who knows the real me most deeply. Dr. Michelle Peris is a naturopathic doctor, the owner of the Poppy Clinic, creator of the Wild Collective, and a wild woman herself. She has helped me realize how important connection and sisterhood are to women's health and well-being. Michelle, welcome back to the podcast.
Are you trying to make me cry?
I have a feeling this might be the episode where there is crying. It hasn't happened yet, but it may happen today.
I'm on the verge.
Okay, me too. Here we go.
It's nice to be back.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that when I first got involved with Wild Collective, one of the things that you had me do as a facilitator was to start to map out some of my own stories. And I remember at that time thinking, I don't have stories. I'm not special. There's nothing special about me. Like, what are these stories that I'm supposed to tell people about? And the story that I came up with, which you had me share in a small group as part of like kind of getting ready to lead the Wild Collective, was a story that I shared about being called Shamu when I was in it was probably grade 7 or grade 8. And it's so interesting because I remember at that time feeling like that moment hadn't been especially like important in my life. Like it was something I never really thought about. And yet when I started saying that story out loud to you and that small group, I broke down into tears. I had this like huge emotional release. And like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Like, I remember in that moment realizing like, holy shit, I do have important stories to share. And that storytelling and sharing our experiences is actually one of the most like healing things that someone can do. So how did you know? Like, how did you come to know that storytelling and sharing our experiences was such an important part of our ability to connect with one another?
I wish I had some scientific answer for you. I get teary hearing you share that because, man, people are so mean, and it may have been girl on girl, but like we are so harsh. And I don't know where the suppression of stories came into our, well, probably much like how we start to self-police ourselves for acceptance of others, right? So then we start to downplay the power and the impact our stories and our experiences have on how we show up in the world, which then, of course, ultimately ends up affecting your health. And when I started Wild Collective, I don't know why. I think when I started with storytelling being the way we opened a circle, my goal, because maybe I'd picked up on it therapeutically in one-on-one. I remember early in my private practice career, I was reaching out to my colleagues and good friends, and I was saying, are you sharing in visits? Are you relating? And kind of hoping I could find my people, because I tried the sterile thing and it really felt inauthentic for me. I tried the white coat thing and having boundaries and like I really tried to fit in, and it felt hard. It felt not integral to how I was maybe meant to help women in health. And when I started sharing my story one-on-one and relating to women, maybe not the full story, but relating to someone's story or identifying, I realized how normalizing her experience was really important for her. Like there was therapeutic value in that. And so maybe there were little clues along the way that storytelling was maybe important. And when I started Wild Collective, from the beginning, I started with a vulnerability story, and I would very intentionally pick the story. Either it was in theme with the content or it was in theme with the question that I wanted us to unpack together. And it was very, very difficult. For the first year, the amount of shame and embarrassment I felt the next day, because I was like, how could these people trust me as their naturopathic doctor once I do this? How, when I'm so exposed, are they going to go on social media and cancel me and say this girl's like a total quack? Like, I remember needing a lot of support in that time because it was so, I felt naked. I felt naked and exposed, and like there was nothing left. And there were energetic consequences. Like I had to learn to adapt to. And to your point, when we start storytelling and opening up the door and creating a level of safety and connection that is vitally important in the therapeutic space, we start to see women share their nuanced stories, because I don't think you're actually alone in that. Like, what stories do I have? Am I even important? Is anything happened to me even important to anybody else? Right? Because we had to put that somewhere to survive and move on and receive love from our caregivers or be accepted by the social group at the time. And so those things get packed away, and we really downplay the importance of them in terms of how we show up in the world and how we actually reclaim our vibrancy and our health and our energy. And so I started to learn very early on that when women did the same, you created the permission slips for them to do that. They started to show up in their life differently. They started to get the results that they wanted to in the one-on-one care space, and everything shifted. Like our stories might be the medicine, actually. Like I love social connection. I love the work that we do, but it is really so powerful to share your story in a safe place, have other people identify or feel moved by it. I'm so deep in this work, and I'm now like watching experiences happen even outside of a wild circle, where I'm like, human connection and our humanity exposure is where it's at. And I think that's why Wild Collective works so well. And I think we reclaim our power. Like I think for you, that I remember, I'll never forget that moment. And It's when we start to realize like our needs and our experiences matter. And until we can sit with those parts of ourselves and make her okay and love on her, it's very difficult to move forward in any capacity. And so many women walk around confused, like, why can't I just take the damn supplement? Why can't I just move my body when I say that's what I really want? It's like, oh my gosh, like we need to unpack that. And we need time and breath to actually unpack that because it's not simple. And it is simple. Like it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can relate so much to what you said about trying to show up in practice in the like very professional way that we were trained to do. And the universe being the magical thing that it is. Literally this morning, I was reading an article by our colleague and friend, Dr. Jordan Robertson, sharing how the day that her practice became enjoyable is when she literally spilled her coffee on like all these labs and had to show up with her patients and admit that she was the kind of doctor who, number one, drank coffee and spilled it all over the place. And that's something I've also really leaned into, is just being my authentic self in my practice. And it's so interesting because there's like that little part of me that's like, oh, am I being unprofessional? Or like, should I share these experiences? But the more I do it, and this is something I really want everyone to hear, is that there's so much healing in sharing your story. And there's so much healing in seeing yourself in someone else's story. And I think the reason that I wanted us to have this conversation is that we have created this way of living where connection and time with friends has become not important or less. We've seen it as less important. And one of the things that really struck me was a few months ago, I was listening to the podcast, We Can Do Hard Things. And Amanda basically said something along the lines of like, well, I don't see my friends because life. And I thought, what the hell kind of life have we created if there's no time left for our friends? Because at the end of the day, isn't that that is the life, that is the living part, is connecting. We are such social animals. So how do you start to help women see that this is something that is not a nice to have? It's not something you're going to do when your kids grow up and leave the house. Like, how do you start to have women see that this is something they need now?
Well, you're asking the $1 million question, because it's the problem, you and I have united on. And like, how do we wake women up to know that this is not a nice to have. This is essential to your longevity, that your connections at 50 predict your health at 80. This is not like a hee hee ha ha, let's like tell our little incontinence stories. This is like, you will live longer.
It's literally life or death. Like
it's life or death.
Legitimately life or death.
And so I think we need to have conversations like this. So thank you for putting yourself out there to do that, because we're constantly trying to solve that problem. And the where I'm arriving to right now with how do I solve that problem is that I immerse women in the solution before I expect them to make an informed decision, because it's like anything, right? Like, we talk about changing your nutrition style and you're like, are you sure I'll feel better? It's like, well, you won't know till you get there, my love. So you may as well try it on. It's the same thing with social connection. Is like, if you are so patterned out, if you are so used to armoring yourself and Miss Independent, I can do this on my own, and nothing's broken, and I'm afraid if I make too many changes, it will all fall apart. So why don't I just keep on keeping on? And that is my biggest obstacle. Like, there were women in our Wild Circle this last week that were like, we have a really hard time telling women what this is. And I'm like, yeah, get in line. We all do. Like, it's the $1 million question. And so the angle we've put it at this time is, why don't you come spend an evening in a retreat? Why don't you come for $5? Why don't you try this on? And then, because I believe every woman after one Wild Collective Circle, and I know you've experienced the same thing, they're like, where has this been my whole life? And I'm like, I know. Mm-hmm. And you sat there in the info session and you were not sure right? I think we are so pulled from our innate wisdom. I think we have for years celebrated Miss Independent. And so we think it's like almost like a sign of failure if we need someone. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Badge of honor.
I was
100%.
going to say,
So it's a failure.
Yes.
100%. So needing social connection or getting your healthcare another way almost feels like there's something wrong with you. And it's really difficult until you're immersed in the solution. I think it's going to be really difficult for you to see the potentiality of the solution. And that's like taking a supplement. That's like following any sort of strategic movement plan. It's the same for social connection. And I think when you get snippets of it, and so I think single evening sessions are important because it gives you a taste. Why I think Wild Collective has worked so well is that we actually give you the breathing room for transformation to occur. Because just like a Tony Robbins weekend, which not like I love him, but there's so many people that are like in his rawness in the event, and they're like, my life is going to change, and then they go back into their everyday, and we're all victims of patterning out because change is scary. And so I think when we give women this time, right, it's once a month, it's 2 hours, it's not too much out of your life, but do 10 of those. And that woman at the end of that is radically different than when she came in. So I think truly the level of honesty I can speak at this is that I think you actually have to do it to see the benefits. So even if Wild Collective isn't necessarily how you engage in social connection, it's actually making the dinners a priority. It's making that friend date a set in stone like we do.
Yes.
We have rules. Like we have to see each other 4 times a year. Yes. And it's like, like husbands probably have opinions, and it's not necessarily easy, but it's a priority to me because very few people fill my cup like you and Leah do. Very few in this world. And so when I leave those weekends, I'm a better wife. I'm a better mother. I'm a better friend. I'm a better doctor. I'm a better facilitator. So if I'm going to take inventory on myself, I'm going to say those weekends are essential for my expansion and showing up in a more powerful way. So therefore, just like taking omega-3s or just like lifting the heavy weights and doing bicep curls, I put those reps in because it's part of my own life prescription.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think where we get caught up is we make so many of our decisions about what we are going to do from a very cerebral, practical place. And if you're trying to make a practical decision about, am I going to leave my family for 2 hours once a month and it's going to be dark and cold, like you're going to talk yourself out of it real quick. When you sit in a circle and your body feels that connection and what it feels like to sit in that circle, you can't not come back. And I think that's that's such a big part of what you teach women in the Wild Collective is to reconnect to their body, is to listen to their intuition. And I feel like as soon as you put a woman in that state, I think there's some kind of like DNA remembering, because women have sat in circles for all of time. And it is only very recently that we decided to do life very independently with no support, with no other women. And I think it's causing massive, massive problems. And so I really feel like Wild Collective is like a remembering and a return to this innate wisdom that we all have, that we have never had the space and the container to connect with. And once the women connect with that, it's like, watch the F out, because there is a powerful woman in here. And now she knows it. And now she's not afraid to step into that. And that is an amazing thing to see.
It's so beautiful. And I think you talking about the cerebral thing is so true. Like we live in our head. We never live in our body. It doesn't feel safe for so many of us, given all of the things that were probably said about our body. You are a perfect example, right? It's not safe there. You were criticized and ridiculed for that body. So of course you want to intellectualize your way through everything, and we want to white knuckle our way through everything. And I think you speak to this beautifully, but how much of our exhaustion is actually iron deficiency and how much is actually working against our innate nature and going against how we were primally designed? And I think that tuning into our body, you're so right. We are wired. Our DNA is wired this way, and we all know visceral truth when we feel it. And that's the gift I want to give back to women. And I talk about it a lot, is like, there's so much noise, right? Keto, carnivore, meh, 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 meh. And it's like, no, what does Sarah feel good eating? What is Michelle? And we were talking about even, we're at such a level with some of these women that I've worked at. We're talking about like, how honest is honest, right? Like in communication, and like, what does coherence feel like for you? And it's going to feel different for you than it feels for me. And to give you 2 examples, like when women learn that there is this type of support for them, they prioritize it no matter what. Like we go throughout the entire summer in some of our higher level programs, and there was a woman who like tuned in from her car. She was like, I miss you. I need you. I just need you in my ears while I drive up to the cottage, because this is so vitally important. This last week, we had a woman in our circle, and she's going through a really rough time in her life. Like it is shockingly difficult. And she was like, I told my husband that I need to go. It's a priority because this is what fills my cup. I need my wild sisters while I go through this, because I'm coping because of what we do together. And there were other women that were like, I'm in a love bubble. Like we're all at different levels in our life, but we come together for these vital hours and we work through and we have conversations that really matter. And it's jet fuel. Like you said, watch out, watch these women conquer any challenge. It doesn't mean that you are armored, that challenge doesn't happen. It means that you are armored and ready to work through it and not pretend like it's not happening, but actually alchemize those emotions for the first time and trust that everything is happening for you. And there's just like this reverence and prioritization. And it's somewhat exhausting trying to scream from the mountaintop at how important this is, because so many of us are numbed out, and I have mad respect for that. And thank God I am like ruthless. Like every woman needs to know about this, but it's so difficult. If you have been betrayed by women, and many of us have, if you don't live in your body and that doesn't feel safe, if you are moderate in your opinions and your good girl conditioning or your domestication process is strong, it is going to be so difficult for you to understand what we're saying. So you have to put yourself in the situation to feel it. Mm-hmm. You need to feel it to know it. And there is no, I think, way around it. It's not a cerebral experience. No. It is a primal, in our DNA experience where you're like, I don't know why, but this feels so right. Mm-hmm. And once you have that, it's like, okay, well then what do I move around to make this a priority? And that's what I see women do. It's like their wild sisters, their time once a month is such a priority for them. They are shifting things around to make sure it works. And I equally am committed to that. So if I'm changing schedules, I show up twice as much in honor of their time, because if that's how serious they take it, and I am right there with them, right? So I think it's so incredibly important for women. And yeah, I mean, I just want every woman to know that it doesn't have to be so hard. And sometimes your exhaustion is simply because you're working against your innate nature, and it's so much simpler than we think. I really pretty much fired myself out of one-on-one practice because they didn't need me as much anymore, because they knew how to navigate their own body. They knew when to see me, but it wasn't continuous every 6-week appointments. They were good, right? They had a lot of skills and intuition about how they were feeling, and their system of care started to really balance out. I really do think we alleviate them, and we certainly help them understand how to reclaim their energy from energy leaks that seem really daunting until you experience them.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking how every time you and I and Leah get together, there's a joke that we like blow up someone's life. But I think
often
yours. But I think that is something that I value so much about our friendship. And one of the things that I've realized about myself recently is how little tolerance I have for like superficial small talk. I would rather be home by myself than be chatting about like something, the weather. I don't care. I just don't care anymore. So that is something that I value so much about the friendships that we've cultivated, that we know each other so well that we like when we get together, we go deep real quick. And there is something so beautiful about having people know you so intimately and loving you enough to hold your feet to the fire, that they're not just going to say, yeah, that's a great idea to everything you say, but that they're actually going to love you enough to challenge you in a nice way, but it doesn't always feel nice. But like, there's something so beautiful about what you've created, and luckily what we've created in our friendship. But I can't help but think about the women who, you said it before, the women who have been betrayed by other women in the past. And I know one of the things that you've shared with me before is that you had some really difficult experiences growing up with girls. Can you kind of share what that was and how you kind of, I don't know, overcame that, or how you were willing to put yourself in these really vulnerable situations after that?
It's just like a rock bottom moment where, you know, when you achieve sobriety, it's like you'll do anything. It's the same. It's I had a deficiency of belongingness most of my life. And so, you know, I really don't blame anyone. And I found it incredibly difficult from my earliest memories, even with my mom and my aunts. I felt different, and I felt like who I was really difficult for those around me. And I felt shame around that. I often was told that I was too loud, too bubbly, too much, you know, to calm down, to all of these things were, you know, I also had a sister who seemed to find like a lot of things easy. And so there was this direct comparison, and she's a lovely human. It was difficult. It was difficult to be the one who, by societal standards or what was being told on me, was the inconvenient one, which was the one, like even my dad and I were laughing. He was just in town, and I was like, I feel that maybe everyone acknowledged my physical appearance because I didn't actually have skills. I had very talented athletic siblings. And then there was Michelle, who was afraid of being upside down, so she had to quit gymnastics. And then there was Michelle, who wasn't scholastically very good, and she really struggled. And I had really big emotions. And I think that is the thing I'm fully feeling these days. So from very early on, I felt like I was too much and there was something inherently wrong with me. And I think because that started off as my core belief from very, very little, that's how I navigated female friendships, is that I actually can now, because I care about my story deeply, because I realize how important it is. I know that I kept things to myself, or I did things that I didn't really want to do, that were because I just wanted to fit in. I bit my tongue a lot, and I just went along with things. And that was majority of my life. And I remember snippets of moments like what you're saying, where like those are the moments where you're never the same. And I remember like moving. I'm from Calgary, and I moved from the Northeast to the Northwest. And if you're from Calgary, you like don't cross quarters. Like no one hangs out in separate quarters, right? So in the Northeast, New Kids on the Block were cool. Fluorescents were all the rage. And when I moved to the Northwest, that was like, who wears that? Like, I remember it felt like searing metal on my body. I never wore fluorescents again. I never wore my New Kids on the Block backpack again. I was ridiculed. I did learn the sophisticated skill of fitting in. I just never felt belongingness. So I could always become cool because that was important to me for some weird reason. But socially, that mattered to me. But it was a struggle. I remember there was one time I was in my teenage years and I had huge curly hair. Someone curled my hair. I felt beautiful. And then I heard what girl, like, it was like stabbing comments of like, who does she think she is? She looks so stupid. It's so ugly. And you're like, oh my God, here I am. And I think there was one about like my first time wearing a bikini and I was really bloated and I felt beautiful. Like I didn't see anything wrong with me, but I sure felt like there was something inherently wrong with me after I heard what was said about me. And unfortunately, my best friend was a frenemy at best. So there was such competition and such combativeness. And I didn't have any female leadership to say like, that doesn't seem very healthy, kiddo. Like that doesn't seem like a really solid friendship. And that's really all I had until, I didn't. And I was told I was no longer welcome in a social group. And I remember thinking my life was over at 18 because I had no friends. And my stepmom was in the picture at the time. My mom, it was in the throes of her own thing going on and was just not able to be there for me. And that was a difficult moment for me for sure. But my stepmom really stepped in for me and loved on me in a way that I really needed to be loved. And that was like one of the glimmer moments. And then fast tracking, you have glimmer moments of people, but it was when I started naturopathic medicine and I met my people that I was like, my life and my perspective changed. People loved me, and the weirder I got, they loved me more, and there was nothing wrong with me. And I remember those moments. Again, they just go in your back pocket. You don't know why your mess is your message or what you're supposed to be learning in those moments, but that I really started to bloom and I really started to think I was, someone who had something to contribute or someone worthy of an opinion, or I wasn't, maybe my loudness was a real asset. Maybe my boldness was a real asset. And those things stuck with me. And then after 7 years of clinical practice, that's when I started seeing women with their lights dim and having a really difficult time. And it's not like they were saying they were lonely, but I viscerally felt it. I felt like there was something fundamentally missing for them. And I was like, what if we put these women together? Mm-hmm. And there was a woman last week, and some of them, the women who were talking, have been with me for like 4 or 5 years now. And one of them was like, she left a job and she was like, I'm going to trust that if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And so she was turning down all of these jobs. And of course, she's scared shitless, right? Like that's that's the first time and she's, obedient by nature and does the right thing. And, and then a job posting came up and all of her wild sisters called her and they were like, this is your job. She got the job. And everything that was a priority to her, like she said, like filtered water and clean air and prioritizing of social connection. It was like everything, so it's those moments. And she's like, I wouldn't have had that without my wild sister. So it's like, it's that. I think when I felt so bankrupt for so long, because to me, social capital now is like the currency. I felt so bankrupt for so long that when my bank account was filled, I made it my mission for every woman to know that was possible. You may not take me up on that opportunity, but I guarantee you, if we have a chance to meet, you will know what that feels like. And you will be able to use that for good in this world. And that's why I think it's our stories, it's our mess that helps us make a difference. And for sure, this is my legacy.
Well, and I think nothing feels better than having someone love you when you're being your real self, right? And sadly, and I was just reading about this, so the way that girls especially connect is like they're very relational, right? We're taught that caring and being with others is really important, where boys are generally a little bit more physical, right? If they have a problem, they're going to literally often fight it out and it'll be done. Girls attack where it hurts, and that is in your social capital. So girls can be so vicious. And so it can be so hard if you've had these experiences with girls or even adult women being vicious. It can be so hard to put yourself out there and to believe that a group of women could be so loving and so supportive. But that makes me think about the different types of loneliness. So I think when we think about loneliness, we often picture like that elderly person who lives by themselves in a nursing home and no one is visiting. And that absolutely is a form of loneliness. But I also think that you can be surrounded by people and be lonely. And I mean, I don't know which one is worse. They're both terrible. But the pain of being, whether it's in relationship, in your family, in your community, and being surrounded by people, but feeling so alone because you aren't actually seen. People don't actually know the real you because you are, like you said, you're armored and you're masked up because you're just trying to fit in. And I think that is something that, sadly, a lot of women can relate to, is that like being surrounded by people, but actually still feeling so alone.
I think it poses a greater problem. Obviously, social isolation, not being in community, is an obvious thing. And we see a lot more cognitive decline and ramifications of that. But I think what the problem with loneliness is that because we are surrounded by people, we love to lie to ourselves because most of us would rather white knuckle our way through than to make change. And there's been a lot of women, they're my favorite. There's a lot of women who come to learn about Wild Collective and they're like, but I've got friends, so why would I do this? And I'm like, tell me more. But like, it's about what you're saying. And I want to highlight, I think it's something really important about your and my friendship in particular, is like, we hold a lot of different fundamental beliefs and we have the best conversations because there's diversity of thought at the table. And I learn a lot from you. And I come home every week and I'm like, you know how special it is, especially after 2020 and everything that happened, how special it is to have friends who don't hold the same opinions, but don't make you bad and wrong and listen to you and you listen to them and you come to a new level of consciousness and awareness and open-mindedness and possibility. And I've started reading Africa Brooks' book and A Third Perspective, and just how difficult and traumatizing it is for us to self-censor and self-police, and women are notorious. And I think now that I'm unpacking that, I don't even think I realize the depths of that. And that's the thing that's confusing. If you have lots of people around and you're holding very similar views, and you might be so good at policing yourself, I'm amazing at this. There are things, and I don't even give them any thought currency because my thoughts were never valued young. So then you think these aren't important, like your story, right? We just like downplay them. And now that I'm like, wait, maybe that's coming up because it has a very specific purpose. And you realize we don't know our desires. We don't know anything. Like I was hiding my desires from my husband. And I'm not talking sexual. I am talking what I want my retirement to look like. Why do I do that? I'm afraid of triggering him. What I've learned about masculine and feminine is like his whole goal is to make me happy. So I'm going to give you a very like simple, if I can, because this was like mind blowing to me. But I've started like stopping self-censoring. And so stuff's coming up and I'm like really freaking out because it's really unusual for me, right? I'm really good. I used to like brag in a wild circle, like I'm a great communicator. No, I am so good at filtering my message so that I'm so vanilla, I don't upset anyone. That's wrong. And I take ownership for that. Like that is not a good communicator. That is being really good at being the good girl. I'm phenomenal at it. And
but it's also not you. And this is why,
the world.
Like when I see you in the unfiltered one-on-one and I see the real Michelle, and then I like see you on Instagram and I'm like, that's not quite it.
And that would explain my lack of following. People feel it, and I've been canceled and it feels like a death for me. And I'm working through that. But here's someone who loves me to death. And I started saying things like, when our kids leave, I don't want to live in this house. I don't want backyard neighbors. I want to be able to frolic naked. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, I thought we were going to live here forever and we were going to travel 6 months of the year and you're going to write a book. We're going to live in Toscana. And he was like, I can't wait to hear why you're saying this to me. Someone saw you naked. And I was like, no one saw me naked. I'm just not censoring my thoughts. I want my own backyard. I want a garden. I want to frolic if I want to frolic. I just don't want backyard neighbors. I'm over it. I understand the purpose right now, but one day I don't want backyard neighbors. Anyways, he was like, I can't wait till I get the real story because I have no idea why. Like, he felt like I was betraying. He's like, who am I married to? I don't know you. This sounds so simple. We went for a walk later, and apparently walking and both of you looking in forward direction instead of into each other's eyes is a lot less threatening. So we were having a really good a conversation walking. And he was like, what do you think that was? I was like, I just wanted you to know whether or not it comes to fruition. I just don't want to hold it in anymore. I just want to, and then he, like, bless him. He was like, okay, well, if we just have to save up this much so that you can then have this house. And it wasn't about me not having it. And so the thing that I'm learning is how often are women settling for crumbs because we're self-policing. It's not even the bad stuff. It's the fucking good stuff, because we are so afraid that someone's going to be like, because I used to have really big dreams and I was told they were, in not a nice way, but they were stupid or they were dumb or they were silly. So then I stopped sharing my dreams. And then we asked these women, what do you desire? And they're like, I have no idea. I actually don't know what I want.
Or they say superficial stuff, because that's the stuff we've all been told. That's not what you want. That's not what you actually deep down want. No. One of the things that I've recently learned about that I find so important, and it relates to what you're just sharing, is the idea of stressing our relationships. And the idea is that when we bring our real truth and our whole selves to our people, we're actually stressing that relationship, which sounds like a bad thing, but stressing your relationship is actually just showing up as your full self and giving your people an opportunity to respond. And so many of us don't do that because we're so afraid of what the outcome or the reaction is going to be that we keep all of it inside. And we're actually missing out on creating stronger relationships and stronger connections. Like, you said this thing to your husband. He was like, what the fuck? But now he knows, and now he has an opportunity. You guys can now work together to like work towards this thing, which wasn't going to happen if you didn't say it. But
that's right.
We keep so much inside, and the energy it takes. Like, I often catch myself, like, I always know it's time to say something when I'm having a whole conversation with my spouse in my head. Like, I'm like rehearsing this whole thing. I'm like, Sarah, just say it out loud. Like, stop having a one-way conversation. Just say it out loud. And this is the other thing. Like, why do we not trust the people that we chose to spend our lives with? We chose them for a reason, and we are not even giving them the opportunity to know us, to know our truth, and to like support and hold us in the ways that we need. And we're just missing out. And that's just one relationship, right? Mm-hmm. A very important one, which is often why I think we do not say it, because we're so afraid of what might happen if we don't say it. But when we don't say it, all we do is create more distance. And we actually create these super disconnected relationships. And then we wonder why we're miserable. And we wonder why women, this stat shocked me, women initiate 69% of divorces. Right? Could we avoid some of that by simply saying, I don't want neighbors so I can frolic naked in my backyard? Right?
Yes. There's so much sweeping under the rug. And I think there's so many women so afraid to like, okay, well, now our habits are there, right? We're used to sleeping. How do I even start having that conversation? And I think we practice these skills together deeply. And I'm like, it's going to go wrong before it goes right. Like there was another situation, travel for me, my husband and I is a thing, and it's a stressor. And I was practicing a new way of communicating with him, and it went awful before it went really right. And he was like, let's book the flight, like get on that plane, go do the thing. It's hard trying to find a new way to connect with people and have conversations. And so back to why it's so important for us to be together is like, how else are you going to break free of what you're actually doing and start doing things differently? You need to put yourself in an environment that's going to encourage that, that's going to invite that, so that you can practice in a safe space. because people are like when you and I, well, I don't know, but like when you and I started talking about controversial subject matter, right? Like probably both our nervous systems got a bit spinny, and then we got better at like, this is a safe space. So I'm going to say the thing. And I know we have an established amount of trust that no matter what the thing is, we're going to love each other through this, right? It's just like partnership. It's just like marriage. It's like whatever. It's, you know, things are going, and to your point about, I can't even remember, but I was thinking it's like flexing a muscle. Like things are hard at first, and it's worth the hard. It is worth having the conversation. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be messy, but it is so worth it. And so when we start to relate to each other in a very meaningful way, to your point, it's like you can have people around you, you can have lots of relationships, and a lot of them might be light and fluffy, and you deep down know it, because we all know what it feels like to meaningfully connect and have our cup filled. And it may be a really long time since you've done that. And I think belly laughs are incredibly therapeutic. And like this past week, we talked about some of the heaviest things. People are going through really hard things, and we belly laughed like 15 times. You know, like all can be there, and life doesn't have to be so hard. And it's a lot less hard when we do it in communion with each other. And there's just so much power in that. And that gets to feed every aspect of your life. I've seen marriages radically improve. I've seen sex lives improve. I've seen communication improve. I've seen mother-daughter relationships, mother and our mother-in-law and daughter relationships improve. Like it is not that hard, and you have to show up. But that's the only requirement. That's the cool part, right? Yeah. It's like, it doesn't have to be heavy or hard at all.
And just showing up, and this is why it's so powerful, is that this is one of the places where we are so tired, is that our social energy cups are so depleted.
Yes.
And we keep going to the like, I'm going to eat more fiber and keto, and I'm going to take some ashwagandha. And I'm like, you do that, it's not going to fix the huge lack of social connection that you are missing out on. And so before you go buy another stupid supplement, before you start another diet or some other like fancy ass workout, book a date with your best friends. Spend more time with people who fill your cup. Spend less time with people who are energy vampires and who are having shitty conversations that you don't care to participate in. So for the women listening who are like, I am ready to fill my social energy cup, I'm ready to like reclaim my wild self, where can they learn more about the Wild Collective?
You can check us out on Instagram. It's the official Wild Collective. We have a website. It's complicated, but aren't we all? It's the-wild-collective.com. We have a podcast, Wild Medicine. So there's lots of content there for you to consume that, you know, is an entry point to the most delicious life. I think every person deserves to be in the pulse and the aliveness of the present moment. And I know social currency is the answer to that. I 100% know that. And I know you do too. And yeah, I think it's just like listening to conversations like this over and over again until you make that friend date, until you do the thing that scares the heck out of you. You are a better woman for it. And the world is a better place because of that woman who chooses herself. And that is, I know this is how the world heals from whatever mess we are stepping out of, because we need that feminine leadership on deck right now, because how we're currently doing things ain't working. And I see at a very microscopic level the power of this, and I know what's possible, and I will not be denied my success.
No, you will not. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle. You're amazing.
I love you.
And the Wild Collective is like, I just can't say enough good things. I always say this, but I was like not at all prepared for the transformation. I thought I was going to help other women like transform. I was like, wait a minute.
It feels like the most selfish job on the planet, because we heal too immensely.
It was such a healing, it was such a healing thing. So thank you so much for being here. And if you're listening, please reach out to your girlfriends, book that date, book that weekend away, prioritize yourself and your friends, You absolutely deserve it, and go check out the Wild Collective. Thanks for listening, and I will see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment to leave us a rating and review, and share this episode with a friend who needs to hear it. If you're ready to get more insight into what's making you tired, find out which of the 5 most common types of fatigue you're dealing with by taking my fatigue fingerprint quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Are you dealing with frazzled fatigue, where your body's exhausted but your brain won't shut up? Or maybe you're more of the drained fatigue type, where no matter how much sleep you get, you struggle to get up in the morning. Just take my fatigue fingerprint quiz and you'll have more insight into which labs to ask your doctor for and what habits and practices are best for fixing your type of fatigue. Find the quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Because let's face it, accepting perpetual exhaustion as the norm, that's just not going to fly around here. Last but not least, I want to thank Jen Hudson and Mike Trutler over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks. Bye.